will be starting shortly. If artists don't fight, they are complicit. The president's refusal to hear the cries of the creative and cultural industry is a clear sign of his lack of knowledge or consideration for our sector. His determination to keep an overripe, underperforming minister in office is a slap in the faces of many. Often I'm reminded of the days when I used to perform for Cyril Ramaphosa's annual charity event, Back to School. This event was always done against the backdrop of a full-on performance show with a full cast and crew of artists, dancers, singers, musicians, crew, and stage managers. Back to School was one of the highlights of the year. I always looked forward to it. He always sat in the front middle table. Often I would dance directly at him, and he would be beaming with joy. I knew this for sure, because the last year that this event took place, for the final performance, the dancers invited the guests onto the dance floor. Ramaphosa and his colleagues were dressed in school uniform to go along with the theme, Back to School. Mr. President shot out of his chair as the dancers invited him and his mate onto the floor. To my surprise, he walked straight up to me, told me he recognized me from all the performances from all the previous years I had participated in his charity event. He then sealed the deal by thanking me for my good work, passing warm compliments of my skills as a dancer and entertainer, and ended it with a friendly pat on my back. I think of this often because in that moment, I truly believed he valued me and all other creatives. But today, I am sadly not as optimistic. I'm hugely disappointed in my president. We are all artists are endangered species. And what's even more worrying is that we are on our own. Hashtag, what happened, Mr. President? Hashtag, not my minister. Hashtag, nothing must still go. That was the Facebook status that was written by Lesego van Niekerk. A lot of you might be wondering, who is this Lesego van Niekerk? She was born and bred in Meadowlands, Soweto. Lesego began her dance career at the age of 5. She turned professionally at age 18 with the original South African musical, African Footprint, and continued to tour the world with the company as a lead dancer for 5 years. While working and touring with African Footprint, Lesego studied and completed her self-taught BCom Economics degree from the University of South Africa. She has worked with some of South Africa's leading musicians like Lira, where she recorded 2 live in concert DVDs and also embarked on a nationwide tour with the superstar. She worked with our own Caspanio Vest in his concert Fill Up Royal Bafokeng. She also worked in the Township Entrepreneur Awards 2018, as well as she did a music video recently shot with our DJ Heavy K. She was seen in the following productions: Winnie the Opera is a Xhosa opera that depicts the life of Winnie Madikizela Mandela. The Fugate Theatre West Side Story. Most recently, her role as June in the world touring company of Chicago, the musical. In 2020, Lesego created, produced, and hosted a 4-part series, The Black Corner, where she engaged with industry professionals about the challenges that people of color face in musical theaters. She wrote a contribution in the new eBook, Creatives on Creating an Antidote to Uncertainty, where she shares her views on the impact of COVID-19 on the dance sector. Lesego is the elected chairperson of the newly formalized South African Dance Alliance, SADA. She sits on the board of the Sustaining Theatre and Dance Stand Foundation, and she serves on the National Steering Committee of the Theatre and Dance Alliance, TADA. Hey, kuno SADA, kuno Stand, kuno TADA, but we are going to unpack that with Lesego. Lesego's dance career has taken her all over the world, but her deepest and truest inspiration will always come from the African continent. My sister, Lesego van Niekerk, welcome to the show. Kunja.
Nkarijani Tami, nice to see you.
It's good. Hey, what a long and very impressive bio.
Thank you so much. I was quite taken aback that you opened with that status. I was not expecting that. I was expecting you to read my bio. I was not expecting you to actually read that status. So it caught me off guard.
Yeah, that's the purpose of the show sometimes. Let's start right there. You understand that? Let's unpack what was going through your mind when you wrote that statement, and also maybe share some of the lovely moments in that process of back to school.
Yeah, well, that night when we were all anticipating the reshuffle, I don't know. I didn't realize that it was going to affect me as much as it did. Obviously, we've ran the petition, which I was an initial signatory of, the Nathi Must Go petition. We've been heavily involved in campaigning against his administration, just simply because he's really not coming to the party. So that particular night, I think there was a lot of, pressure in the air when it comes to us as performers, and is the president going to hear us? Because we've put in so much effort in trying to get him to hear our pleas. And then he did not do what we thought he would do. And I remember sitting and looking at the television for a good 10, 15 minutes afterwards, thinking, no, man, I'm sure he's going to come back. I'm sure he forgot that he needs to do something. Maybe iPad, I don't know. Maybe they missed the notes. I don't know what happened, but it didn't happen. So I went to bed with a broken heart, to be quite honest. And I kept replaying that memory in my mind, which I play quite often, particularly over the last year with what's been going on in our creative sector. And I remember it quite vividly, it was quite a wonderful event. In that particular event, I believe we sang happy birthday to him, because it was around the time that it was his birthday. So it was a special time, and getting to engage with him personally, and just the realization that he was the person that was responsible for all of our jobs. It was the dancers, the singers, the choreographers, the stage managers, the backstage crew, the lighting designers, the technicians, everybody. He was the one that formalized our paycheck, basically, so to then come back all these years later and to almost feel forgotten by him, it was a weird moment for me. It was very weird.
Thank you very much for speaking your mind on that post. You've done quite a lot of stuff. We understand, especially from someone that is coming from born and bred in Soweto. We've got so many artists, you understand, in the grassroots level who don't believe that one day they will make it in this dog industry. And you've done quite a lot of big shows like African Footprint, Winnie the Opera, West Side Story, Chicago, the musical, and you've done quite a lot of other things. Please share with us your experience as someone coming from Soweto when you are in those big stages.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I'm very proud of where I come from, you know, and wherever I go, I always lead with I am Lesego from Middleland, Soweto, because for me, it's important that people that look like me come from where I come from, the same streets. For me, it's important that they know that they can really be anything they want to be quite honest. And I have to be honest that I was also very lucky to be nurtured, to be in the company that I was in terms of, you know, my family and the schools that I went to. So I know that not everybody that comes from where I come from is privileged enough to have those kind of things. I will say though that I attribute the start of my career to the street that I grew up in Netherlands, the Khotswane Street. I attribute my career to that because when I was 17, when I was in matric, my uncle asked me what I want to do with my life, you know, because he could sense the confusion, whether I'm going to dance, am I going to study something academic, what am I going to do? And he was picking up my uncertainty. So he asked me that day and I told him the truth. I said, Uncle, to be quite honest, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said to me, let's take a walk. And we left the yard and we walked down the street. And he stood in the street and he, Ashapa Flate, you know, and the guy, Thabo Komape, came out. Thabo Komape is one of the original cast members of African Footprint. And Thabo Komape, I had no idea who he was. I had no idea he was even a dancer, along with some legendary people like Tabiso Kuba, Franz Ramoba. He comes from that time. And I met Thabo, my uncle introduced me, said, this is Thabo, he dances for African Footprint. First of all, my mind was blown because I was like, oh my God, I'm meeting somebody who's in this show. I never thought that I could even breathe in the same direction as people on that level, you know? And then my uncle told my Thabo what I do. She's a young dancer. She's at the National School of the Arts. She's in matric. She doesn't know what to do. Do you have any advice for her? And lo and behold, Thabo then let me know in that moment that African Footprint is having an audition a few months later. So it was in the streets of Netherlands that I actually got my breakthrough. And obviously you have to follow up on the breakthroughs. But yeah, I think miracles can happen. It doesn't matter where you come from, whether you come from Santon or whether you come from Mikuvletu or wherever you come from. I think it's also a matter of purpose and really understanding who you want to be in the world. And if you really trust that and you just trust it with your all, I really do think that you will get led in the right direction. The same way I got led to go down the street that day, and now I'm here, you know.
And now, Lesego, can you please tell us more about the Black Corner, especially that you were dealing with the challenges that people of color face in the musical theater? Because sometimes we don't really speak about these things and they are happening and we are hiding behind closed door as if everything it's perfect. Can you please elaborate about the Black Corner and also the challenges that are facing people of color?
Yeah, the Black Corner, basically last year, 2020, was a very difficult time for everybody. First of all, we were propelled into a national lockdown, but then also the Black Corner was sparked during the time when George Floyd was murdered in America. And his murder basically, it shook us all up around the world, particularly people of color. And you know, there was a huge revolution of Black consciousness, and there were protests and marches, and it was very busy in the street and on social media, you know. And I remember a friend of mine, a choreographer on Broadway in New York, he shared a post on Facebook because obviously he was in America, so he was right in the middle of what was going on with the whole George Floyd thing. And he shared a post on Facebook that's titled, there's white privilege, then there's also white theatrical privilege. And then under that, it was listing all the white theatrical privileges that happen. For instance, you know, white people have a better chance of getting into a musical than Black people in this country. I'll give an example. When I was in Chicago, there was only me. I was the only woman of color, Black woman ensemble, and the rest were white women. So, you know, that's just one of the things. That's tokenism, really. It's called tokenism, where you end up being the token Black person. So those are the kind of things that were listed in that post. And I was very moved by it because I know that I've experienced anti-white privilege in my case as a musical theater performer. So I pressed the share button on Facebook, and I did not expect the action that I got from my industry peers, professionals, very well-known singers, dancers, actors that came onto my post and were commenting and reacting. So I realized that actually this is a common problem. It's not just me. It's just that we don't speak about it. So you think that you're alone. So a friend of mine called me and he said, do you realize what you've done on Facebook? You've shaken things up. And I said, I realize, and that was not my purpose. I was just sharing something that I felt was touching my heart. So he said, look, you've opened a can of worms and I think you should take it further. So what started as an idea to do a very easy podcast with like a cell phone ended up in a proper 4-part series with an entire production team. And I turned my house into a studio. It was quite crazy. And we did that because we realized that the issues that we wanted to cover in the Black Corner are so multifaceted. It's not just one little issue. There are so many issues when it comes to being a person of color in entertainment. Particularly in musical theater, because that's what the show was focusing on. So we decided to take the series and divide it into 4 sections. The first episode was Where Did It Come From? And we interviewed award-winning actress Ilse Klink, along with Broadway choreographer Gregory Butler. And basically that episode was about where does it come from? Because in 2021, as performers and people of color, we still have issues, but those issues did not start in 2021. Where did it come from? So that's what we spoke about. And I also invited Gregory Butler from Broadway, and people always ask me, why Gregory? And that's because a lot of us know that when we do these musicals in South Africa, especially the blueprint musicals, so they take the exact product as it is. For instance, Chicago the Musical, Matilda, Singing in the Rain, all of these musicals. When it's a blueprint, they take the team out from Broadway, the choreographers and directors, they bring them here to South Africa, and they position them here with us, the cast, for about 5 to 6 weeks. And in that time, we are basically groomed by them. So in essence, Broadway directly affects our musical theater industry here in South Africa, because even though they leave us after those 5, 6 weeks, they've instilled their principles. So I thought it would be a good idea to bring Gregory on to explain to us how it happens in Broadway and to see if there are any connections. And there are huge connections, because people of color are people of color. Doesn't matter where you are. At the end of the day, we look the same. So our issues are generally going to be the same. So that was the first episode, and we unpacked those kind of things, and they both come from a previous generation. So they were able to give better perspective than myself, who comes from a more, this kind of generation. The second episode, we then called it, How Do You See Me? And How Do You See Me is about representation. How do you see me as a Black person? You people in show business that are responsible for putting me on stage, So we had producers, Lebo Toko and Clive Matibe, along with international producer David Block, to talk to us about, as producers and people who actually create these shows and these musicals, what goes through your head when you look at people of color? When you give me the role of the maid, when I don't necessarily have to be the maid, because there are so many other people that can be the maid. What is it that makes you decide that? When you decide to hire me as the only person of color in a cast of however many people, we are in a country where 83% of the population is Black, but in a cast, only 1% is Black. What are the thought processes behind something like that? So that's what we unpacked in episode 2, which happens to be my favorite episode, by the way. Episode 3, we spoke about the little things. And in the little things, we basically talk about the everyday, what do they call them? Passive aggressive things that happen to people of color that people don't even realize they're happening. For instance, the amount of times that women of color in entertainment have to explain their hair. I can't tell you how many times I've stood in a lineup of female performers, and let's say all 9 of them are white, and I'm the 10th person and I'm the Black one. And the choreographer, the director, whoever it is, will look at the line and get to the end of the line and look at me and say, so what are we going to do with your hair? And for me, it's those little passive aggressive things that happen on a day-to-day basis for Black people that we don't speak about, but they break our spirit, double standards as well, It's known, the African time thing is heavily associated with Africans of color, people of color. So if a white person gets to rehearsal late, chances are something happened to them for them to be late. But if a person of color is late, African time, because, well, Black people, they can't hold time. So it's also those double standards that we were covering in that episode. And finally, the final episode, which is does the show go on? We basically talk about how do we move forward now that the cat's out the bag, and we've spoken about these white theatrical privileges. As this generation, what is our plan? How are we going to tackle those things? So we spoke about things like the need for Black people to create their own platforms, but also the need for non-people of color to tackle the issues of people of color, because it doesn't help if we here on our own fighting the fight and you just sitting there enjoying the privileges that you're getting. It's not going to help. So that's how we close the show, and that show is very precious to me. It was done completely from my pocket and the pockets of those that I was partnering with. We did not have external sponsors. As I said, I turned my house into a studio. It was done under very hectic COVID-19 restrictions. So it was a difficult project to put together, but we put it together because of the importance of the message of the ailments and the difficulties that people of color face in musical theater and in entertainment in general.
It's a very important program, and I wish you've got a plans, you understand, of continuing, because we've seen, like, you know, in South Africa, when you see artists going abroad and working with in so-called white companies, you understand, there are a lot of things that are happening there, and people are not speaking openly. You understand? And some people will say, when you speak English better, you understand that you are in a better position. But when it's hard for you, you become a laughing stock. You understand? These are realities that are happening in our industry. Do you have any plans of taking the program further, or that's it? Up until someone comes and say, Minister of National Theatre, here is funding, do this, or National Arts Council, Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. Is there any plan for taking it further? Because I feel it's important.
It's so important. It's so important. I can't tell you, I think about the Black Corner every single day. I hear our title sequence song in my brain every day. I was singing it just this morning because I was so heavily invested in that project. Unfortunately, I cannot do it the same way that I did it before because it's not sustainable. However, there are plans, or rather, let me say there is a desire to take it forward. I think it's just a matter of strategizing and, like you're saying, figuring out different channels or partnerships or whatever that can make it happen. I do think that the Black Corner is completely important. Even those 4 episodes that we had, they are so powerful that, you know, I'm looking into recreating that, you know, but so let me answer you this way. It is noted on my goal list, but at the moment there are no practical plans to make it happen again.
So if there's anyone who's watching this episode, and you know, funders, investors, and you know, people who can make this, because it's important. We've got Black artists that are all over the world are performing in these companies. You understand? We want to know what is going through to them. So please holla at Lesego, find a way of collaborating and making sure it becomes a reality. Moving on, you made a contribution on the book. The title is quite tricky: Creatives on Creating an Antidote to Uncertainty. You will explain this title, but also tell us about your views, especially in terms of the impact COVID-19 on dance, because we've been hearing a lot about film industry, about theaters, you understand, but specifically, talk to us with dance and musical theater.
Yeah, Creatives on Creating an Antidote to Uncertainty. I did not come up with the title. I was approached by the editor, Salone Santino, who approached me to speak on behalf of the sector, which, first of all, I have to say was a huge honor, because those who are dancers out there will know that the way our sector is fragmented as dancers, the way it's so disconnected, you cannot have just one spokesperson. So it was a tricky task for me to take on, but I took it on nonetheless because I thought I was capable of portraying a simple but in-depth look at what actually happened to us. And some of the things I covered were the vulnerability, of course, the vulnerability that we all felt. I spoke about what happened to me and what I noticed within the first kind of few weeks of being in a very harsh lockdown. And I'll tell you about it. For instance, you know, staying with my husband, he belongs to the banking sector. He's an intern, a private banker. So whereas I'm an artist. So he works for a big company, 9 to 5, that kind of setup that is very completely different to the kind of setup that we have. Immediately upon lockdown, he was contacted by the company that he works for to say, can we send you your computer screen? Can we send you your chair for your desk? Can we send you, what can we do to help you? And within days, my house was filled with 3 different computer screens, keyboards, office chairs, to make his life easier. I did not have anyone calling me asking if I had a studio to continue practicing in, to make sure that I'm still fit and I'm still technically trained and whatnot. So that was the first thing that I realized, to say, oh, okay, so there's no plan of action for me here. There's a plan of action for him that is mobilized within a matter of days. That stood out to me was when in the mornings, every morning at 9 o'clock, his company and his teammates and his members and all those people. And before they even go into the meeting, they would be discussing how you're doing. So they'll start, Tammy, how are you doing? What's going on? The lockdown. How are you doing? And so on and so forth. And I realized that was good for mental and psychological health. Whereas for me, I didn't have that. I didn't have that. I didn't have anybody that was calling and asking, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you fine? I did not belong to a community of people. So that was my first thing, to say I belonged to a sector that actually the crisis, which was very scary for me. So those are some of the things that I spoke about. I also spoke about how we had to look at the sector very quickly. The important need for collaboration.
Yes, I can hear you, but you keep on breaking smaller things, but I can hear you.
Oh, okay, because I was picking up some feedback on my side. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, the other thing that I spoke about, the importance of collaboration, you know, because as dancers, we are so trained to be individuals and to shine and compete against the ones that are next to you. And for the first time, we are realizing the importance of collaborating with other people. So that's another thing. And also just the importance of looking at yourself, not just as a dance institute. You have to not getting wings. You know, so I highlighted some of the work that people did, taking their dance out of the box. And, you know, serving it to people differently, because that's the world that we're in now. We can no longer look at things as black and white. We have to now operate in the gray area. So that was largely what my contribution was based on.
Wow. And another thing that I want, when it comes to dancers, you understand that we know in film industry, there are people that are speaking out for film industry, in theater and blah, blah, blah. But I feel sometimes we hear less voices from the dance sector. You understand? Some of the people will always say, dancers, they always focus on themselves and on their gigs. But when it comes in terms of mobilizing and coming together, we understand, speaking about the challenges. I'm not saying what dancers are not speaking out. We understand because some people prefer to use their art in terms of speaking out, using their art. But in terms of like activism, we understand the coming up. Why do you think that is it an issue? Firstly, we understand that more dancers are not coming out in terms of like speaking out, or it's the matter that maybe we don't understand how dancers work. How do you feel about this whole thing?
Hey, dancers are tricky breed, eh? You know what? If you think the way that we are trained as dancers, we are not trained to be outspoken. We are trained to be bodies. Let's be honest. We're trained to be bodies. We are trained to operate with our bodies. So it becomes tricky when it's time for dancers to have to express themselves verbally, because we're not trained like that. If anything, and I'm going to be honest, and maybe some people will not like me for this, but it is the truth that for the powers that be on the authority, it is better for them if dancers are silent. And what tends to happen is that when a dancer becomes outspoken, and this has happened to me a few times, especially when I was 100% just dancing all the way, you know, before I started working on other things. I'm a very outspoken person, and when you become outspoken, you get labeled as the troublesome one, or you get labeled as the older ones that think they know. So what then tends to happen culturally in dance is that you either, you know, as you grow older, you learn more things and you become more confident in yourself. So you know what you will accept and what you won't accept. And what tends to happen in dance is that when that happens, the older ones get, you know, and then the newer ones get brought in because they are so quiet and they will just do as they're told and whatnot. I'm sure this will offend a lot of people, but it is the truth that I have experienced in that for the authorities, the powers that be, there are certain choreographers, directors, producers that would just prefer if you just say nothing, just say nothing. So it's become a bit of a culture. What I can tell you though is that dancers are the biggest complainers of all the artists. They are the biggest complainers. You finish a show at the back of the bus, in the hotel room, in the theater, in the dressing room. After rehearsal, we will always complain that we will never actually action and do what we're supposed to do. The other issue of that is that the dancers are constantly threatened with being replaceable. So if you speak up, or if you decide to do something, there's always that threat of, well, if you don't want to, there's always the next one, you know. So it's always easier for someone to keep quiet. And that is why a lot of the time dancers will go together and complain, and then the next day you decide, tomorrow we're changing the game, we're doing this thing, we're standing up for ourselves. And then there'll be the one person, like a Lesego lady, who decides the next day she's going to be the voice. And all the others that had said they were going to speak with Lesego, maybe had a change of heart during the night, they realize that they might get replaced and lose their job, and then Lesego is out there on her own. And then what then tends to happen is that all the Lesegos that are out there who desire to speak out notice that I'll probably be left at the altar by myself. So it's better for me not to say anything. It's a weird cultural thing that dancers have had for a very long time, and I don't understand where it's coming from, but I'm happy that organizations like the South African Dance Alliance are around, because hopefully those are the kind of things that we will be able to tackle and instill the culture of speaking out as dancers and having a voice, you know? Just having a voice, just speaking out and expressing yourself, you know, which is something we don't do.
Thank you for Lamachabulu. And I know you are elected now as the chairperson of South African Dance Alliance, SADA. Can you please tell us more so that people who are watching can get an idea of what is SADA and all that jazz?
Yeah, the South African Dance Alliance, which actually was, the idea of it was brought about last year in the lockdown, when we realized just how marginalized we are as a sector. You know, and that conversation was going on between myself and two of my colleagues, Niekerk and Antidote. And we used to, all of our conversations on a daily basis, by the way, for all those 5 months of that hectic lockdown, they were circling around the idea of having this body that can just be there for us, because the main thing is that we did not have a community. When we got into the lockdown, we had nowhere to go. It was every man for himself and God for us all. So this year, when I was asked to be part of the interim steering committee of the Theatre and Dance Alliance, I was invited by Niekerk, and sitting in there as an ISC member, and then I realized the people that were sitting in there. We had people from SADA, which is the South African Guild of Actors, people from House of Crew, different organizations out there that are representing their own sectors. And then myself, Lesego van Niekerk, is there to speak on behalf of the dance sector. And for me, that did not feel balanced. It did not feel right. I did not feel that anybody could do that on an individual capacity. So I went back to the drawing board, and I speaking to Mike, who's also a mentor of mine, Mike van Graan, and going back to the drawing board and saying, look, this is what I picked up in the meeting of the interim steering committee of the Theatre and Dance Alliance, and I don't think it's right that I sit here and speak for an entire sector. So I thought it's the right thing to do to try and initiate the South African Dance Alliance thing. So put together an ISC from 5 different provinces around South Africa, including legendary people like Regina Thompson, Alfred Henkel, Esther Nessa, and also people in our generation, Epeling Rafe, Rosalie Wilkins, Niekerk, Quintus Janssen, people that came together and to do this thing to the South African Dance Alliance. And I'm happy to announce that we were formalized as of last week, which means we have a chairperson, we have a deputy chairperson, we've got a national official of 10 people, we've also got a Gauteng representative, a Northern Cape representative, and a Western Cape representative. And the aim of the South African Dance Alliance, of course it's in the name, alliance, we need to align our industry, our sector. The dance sector is so segmented. The ballerinas are there, the Pantsula dancers are there, the cultural dancers are there, but also there's just so many unnecessary politics. But I'm hoping that through this alliance, we can find even ground, and support each other. But more importantly, somebody needs to do the work to advocate for the interests of the dance sector. Nobody does that. Nobody's really concerned about that. Nobody's really concerned about the well-being of dance. We know what dance policies are and how they influence us. Facilities, infrastructure, dance education right now is under threat. Our dance education is under threat. We are at the moment producing underqualified and underskilled dancers. It only perpetuates when we get into the professional world. We receive these new dancers and we have to put them through a whole other training. So there's so many things that need to be tackled for dancers in this country, and I'm really hoping that the South African Dance Alliance, it's not going to be easy, and I know that, and I know that myself and the rest of the community have our work cut out for us, because this is unprecedented to our sector. The last time there was a dance alliance was in the early 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s, and apparently it was dismantled because they felt there was no need for a dance alliance, which I think was a bad decision, because that is about 20 years of no dance alliance. Can you imagine if that particular dance alliance was still up and running for all these 20 years, where our sector might have been today? Who knows? Dancers who had issues with charges. Dancers don't know how to charge confidently and say, this is my work. When you ask me, that is a problem, because it perpetuates this system of people continuously being taken advantage of, people continuously being at the bottom of the system. So it's time that we flip the script, and I'm hoping this is the organization that's going to help us flip the script and bring us all together to do it.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. And how can people or dancers throughout the country who wants to become members, is it open for individuals or organization? How can one become part of SADA?
It's open for individuals, it's open for dance companies, it's open for institutions, educational institutions, festivals as well. Anybody who operates and makes at least part of their livelihood within the South African dance sector. So if you would like to sign up, you can either go to our Facebook page, and our membership form is pinned right at the top. It's at SADA, at SA Dance Alliance, SADA on Facebook, or you can email sadancealliance@gmail.com, sadancealliance@gmail.com. You can email and say you'd like to be a member, if you can please get the membership form, or as I said, you can just access it directly on our Facebook page, which is pinned right at the top.
Munati. Another thing, a lot of people, I know it's not only in dance, you understand that people, they always complain, there are so many structures. We have, like, typical example, I'm involved in for the Arts, which is the civil movement society, you understand? I'm involved in Abahlali movement drive, which is totally different from for the Arts, because Abahlali movement drive is it's a protest action group or activation. We do activation, you understand, when there are issues. And I'm also involved in South Sea, which is totally different from for the Arts, totally different from Abahlali, because South Sea is a federation. It's sort of like a motherboard, you understand. Someone might be asking there, hey, there is SADA, there is TADA, there is STAND, we understand all of them. Can you, in simple words, we have share with us what is the difference, so that people who are watching can say, oh, I can be a member of SADA and still be part of TADA or part of STEM programs and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, so I'd like to start by actually, a few days ago, Umamspungile Mngoma, who's the president of I'm for the Arts, she shared on the I'm for the Arts page, she shared a call from the National Arts Council for board members or something of the like. And her call was to say, artists, please apply. We need some of our own in these spaces, right? And I thought that was an important call that she made. I then went into the comments and I read one of the comments, and there was a lady who then said, but Spongile, why don't you go? And Spongile's simple answer was, I can't do everything. So that is why, number one, I think that there is space for all of these organizations, because we can't, or South African Dance Alliance can't do everything, just like I'm for the Arts can't do everything. If we all understand what our mission is and our specialization is, we can all hold one branch of a tree and create a massive tree. So first of all, just want to start by saying that there is room for all of these organizations because they're all doing different things. With that said, the STAND Foundation is not a member-based organization. The STAND Foundation is an organization that was brought about in September 2020 by a group of people in the sector who felt that something needed to be done about the state of the arts in our country, because clearly the powers that be were not doing anything, to be quite honest. So STAND Foundation is about sustaining theatre and dance, creating platforms and ways in which we can sustain theatre and dance. So we do that through educational programs like our leadership initiative. We do that through other educational and interactive programs like the Cultural Policy Campus that I know that you also attended yourself. We also create platforms like just last month, or sorry, 2 months ago, we did the first ever Josie's Comedy Festival, which created work for over 25 artists. So we are not a member-based organization where people come and sign up for us. We are not an advocacy or a representative structure. We are just a structure that is out here trying to support the arts, trying to support dance, trying to support theater in ways that we can, like creating platforms of performance, or creating opportunities of work, or cultivating a new tier of leaders within our ecosystem here, our theatre ecosystem here in South Africa. So that is the STAND Foundation. Then you've got the Theatre and Dance Alliance. That is a member-based structure, and the Theatre and Dance Alliance is the mother body of the theatre sector in essence. So everybody who operates within theatre, and just remember that theatre is not just about the dancers and the actors and the singers. Then you've got the seamstresses, then you've got the crew, then you've got writers, you've got poets, you've got composers, you've got all of these people that form this thing that we know as theatre and dance. So that is the Theatre and Dance Alliance. And under the Theatre and Dance Alliance, you've got those kind of organizations like SAGA, like House of Crew, like South African Dance Alliance, and so on and so forth. Then you've got South African Dance Alliance, which is purely about the business of dance. And somebody might argue and say, but then the Theatre and Dance Alliance, it's also dance. And my argument is no, because the Theatre and Dance Alliance, while yes, they are looking at dance, they're also looking at everything else. So dance will always be pooled into somebody else's pool. And that is how we are always ending up at the bottom of the food chain, because we don't have our own platform. And that is why the South African Dance Alliance is there, to look at solely dance issues that South African dancers face in the sector. So as I said, from my explanation and from the introduction that you gave as well, there's more than enough room for everybody, because everybody is doing different things. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that explanation. I think it's important, so that we might be saying people don't want to join, but people are not aware. You understand that? Because there's a lack of information. And before we close, I know you are one of the co-chairs in the Charter of Rights for South African Artists. We understand. Can, in your own words, explain the importance? Why should artists be part, of this charter, the importance of the charter?
Yes, I'm co-chair along with you, Tammy. And in case nobody knew, yes, myself and Tammy are co-chairing, and it's a joint initiative between TADA, Theatre and Dance Alliance, which I will be representing, and I'm for the Arts, which Tammy is holding the fort for. So, I mean, really, the Freedom Charter, any charter, is always created with the base of really setting a tone for how people can operate and how people can be respected, nurtured in a space that they call home, in essence. And for artists, our artistic ecosystem is the place that we call home. So it is important that we have a charter like this. And though it is not yet recognized by the powers that be, but it is important that we bring it to their attention, just like the Freedom Charter was brought to the attention of those that make things happen, in essence. We as artists, in the status that you mentioned earlier on, I say that artists are what did I call it? An endangered species. We are an endangered species because even before COVID-19, we're endangered because our rights have never really been respected. To this day, artists are not seen as laborers. To this day, artists struggle for social benefits. To this day, our tax policies are not in favor of artists. That is a problem. Those are human rights that are being violated. And for how much longer are we going to allow that to happen to us for artists, as artists? So I do think that we should all get behind this, because, one of my favorite ones is Clause 10, that says artists have the right to safe physical working environments, including reasonable hours of work where our health and our safety are not compromised. That sounds so simple, but coming from a dance background, that means everything to me, because there's nothing more disrespectful and more just degrading than getting to a stage or any kind of place as a dancer and having to dance on a dirty floor, or having to dance on a floor that's not rigged, or having to operate in a place that has not been ventilated, or all of these things that we take for granted. At the end of the day, that consequence lays on me. I am the one that has to deal with the consequences of that. So it seems like very minor things, but they are minor things that make up our everyday life. There's one of the clauses that speaks about our royalties and our copyright. We've seen over the last years how artists are dying, and dying as paupers, as they so much love to call us. They love to call us dying as paupers. But why are we dying as paupers? We're dying as paupers because our rights are not acknowledged. Our rights are not met. My right to be paid for my work is not acknowledged in South Africa, and that is a real case. So if we don't tackle that, there will be more artists that are dying like paupers, when we all know that in essence, we should not be dying as paupers, because we're abundant, we're super abundant, but that abundance is not coming to us. And I think this charter is a channel that we can use to overcome these challenges that I've just highlighted. So,
that was umkhabulo for you. Is there any last remarks from you before I let you go? Because this was really helpful. And as part of the show, we understand that we want to tackle issues around policy, governance, and also look at different sectors. You understand? I invite someone from music, from theater, from visual arts, from craft, and we speak about matters around arts. You understand? Any closing remarks from your side, this one?
Yeah, thank you for that, Tammy. I think for me, I will just like to encourage those that we identify as the youth, the young people. I would like to encourage us to take a different approach to this thing that we call arts and culture and this thing that we call our careers, because we see that the approach that we have taken has not worked for us. It's left us right back where we started. So I want to educate people I want to encourage people to educate themselves about their sector, learn about the organizations that are out there. How can you get involved? How can you educate yourself about your sector? Because I think part of the problem is that we actually don't understand the sector that we operate in. We don't understand much about what's going on. And we're also not involved. We're too far away from the fire. We are allowing things to happen for us, as opposed to actually making things happen to us, as opposed to actually making it happen and leaving it in our own hands to make those things happen. So I would just want to encourage the young people to get involved, guys, because this is your sector. Those that came before us, they are moving out slowly but surely, and eventually it's going to be us. And I personally do not like history repeating itself. I really don't. I think it's unnecessary, and I think we can start making steps, but it's going to be up to us, our generation, and the ones that are coming after us, not the ones that came before us. So let's start acting. Let's start getting involved. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sis Lesego. When you speak about history, there is a saying that don't bank on your history, but bank on your potential. We understand. We can't be talking about the past, blah, blah, blah. We need to find a way of moving forward. Thank you very much for joining us today. This was a very helpful and fruitful conversation. Thank you very much for everyone that is tuning in our show, State of the Arts with Tammy Akambong. Every Monday and Wednesday at 4 o'clock, we are having guests, and we cover some of the issues that are pending in the cultural and creative industry. From me,